Hi, I'm Chris Chernohoy from the University of Wisconsin River Falls, and with me is guest Alex Shapiro. She is the commission composer for 2022, and we are so happy to have her in residence. Welcome, Alex.
Thank you, Chris.
What a joy to finally get you here off that island and into the middle of Wisconsin.
No, the edge of Wisconsin.
Okay, we're on the edge of Wisconsin. You're right, you're a detailed person.
I'm a detailed person. This is a pleasure. This is a pleasure. I'm glad you twisted my arm to do this, and I'm so glad.
Are you? I
so
really
happy.
did twist your arm.
I am so happy. I always remember getting that call from you, and you made a very convincing and wonderful invitation that I'm so happy I'm here.
We just so badly wanted you here. And this Commission Composer Project is, as you know, quite the deal. 56 years of wonderful, wonderful composers. And the founder of this is just excited for us. We're excited for it. And we are just happy that you took the time to be here.
And I am honored to be part of this legacy. I have to tell you, this is something. It's really, is this the oldest commissioning program in the US?
It is.
That's really impressive. That's
Continuous running.
Wow.
Very exciting.
Wow.
So with that in mind, we're premiering a piece called Free.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about the inspiration. And our conversation was so funny when I was trying to convince you to take this commission. I'm like, well, just something about the air and the wind, and you're living on the island, and what's it look like out from you? It can be simple, I said it can be 4 parts. There's been a lot of small pieces during COVID that we've made. I said, do what you want. Think air. So tell me about that.
That was so funny because I remember so well. One of the things that made my life easier psychologically is because I had a lot on my plate at the time. And you did say all those things, and you said it can be really short. I mean, you basically could have said, you know what, you could just, do the phone book and we'll play it. Like you could have said anything, and you took all the pressure off of me. So for the longest time, I thought, well, this is great because I can just do a short piece and something that's not complicated, and we'll have a good time putting this together no matter what. And of course, that didn't quite happen. What turned out instead is I give you this 8-minute long, rather complicated piece that poured out of me. And as I wrote you, I think in one of the emails, the music, which is very spirited in a lot of places, and certainly bucolic and free flowing, it was in part inspired by you and your spirit, because even though we don't know each other well, I remember really distinctly meeting you 3 years ago at the Midwest Clinic, and we just clicked. We were at a talk. There wasn't a lot of time for us to really talk much to each other, but there was just something so fun about your energy and about you were just dialed right in, and that stayed with me. And then we had that fun phone call, quite a while later. And so when I was writing the piece, I was thinking about you and your spirit, and I was just thinking about what it is in general to be, as I said recently to the students earlier today, to the conducting students, about it being such a great time to be a composer because there are no rules anymore, and we're free to write in any styles we want, in any genres, put them all together, keep them separate, whatever we want to do, as long as we're doing it authentically, right? And so this piece, because there was no expectation at all on it, was very freeing. It gave me that freedom.
Well, what you did with the piece has been just a delight for us to work on. And so thank you for your creative genius. And at one point we had talked about how you're known for your electroacoustic tracks and all the things that go with it. And I remember us saying, well, should we put that with it or should not? And you said something like, can you guarantee that there will be people who can really keep the beat?
Right.
All the way through.
Yep.
Can you guarantee me that? And I said, I can. We don't need a track. Let's do this without a track.
This was great because I had reached that point in the piece, which is very thickly orchestrated in a lot of places. And I had reached that point where it really didn't need a track. And I don't believe in putting things in just because you can. I think you add elements. And for me, an audio track is an additional section of an ensemble that makes different sounds. And I didn't want to just toss it in for no reason, but the one purpose it could have served if needed, which and that's why I asked you, is to keep everybody at a very, almost a metronomic tempo at a certain thing, because it's got that energy, those ostinatos, those repeating patterns have to stay that way. And so I just wanted to know is if because I could have made life easier for the percussionist and everybody else by giving some of those lines, a lot of that heavy lifting to elements in a track, not using the same percussion sounds, but using different kinds of sounds that would get that job done and propel the piece. But so I did check with you because I love the collaborativeness of writing music for an ensemble, for a conductor, for human beings that are going to play it. And what is better than midway through checking in with you and saying, I'm at a crossroads. This could be an electroacoustic piece or it could be an acoustic piece. And I was pushing a little toward the acoustic. I was hoping you would say acoustic. And you did. You were like, oh, of course, no problem. And it's like, yippee. And so that helped me really finish up all the orchestration and give a lot of thought to how those percussionists were going to play and keep the pulse going forward. So that was a really fun moment there. Very collaborative.
Well, and I understand that when you are composing, like some of the other pieces that will be on the program, Tight Squeeze and Paper Cuts, that when you look at the electroacoustic as a separate voice, as a separate idea, as almost like, if you will, a chamber group. Maybe we can liken it to a chamber group that's part of the entire piece. So what would be interesting to me after you've heard the world premiere and actually after we've worked on this and done all this, it would be very interesting to me if you decide that you're going to add something like that as an option for people later. Does that ever happen?
It has happened once. I have retrofitted, so to speak, pieces where I knew that it would be fun to have an additional version, but it doesn't happen often. And with this, it could certainly. There would be room for a little bit of adding an element, but I don't think. Well, we'll see how I did with the orchestration, but I don't think it needs it. But we'll find out.
No, I don't think it needs it, but it would be very interesting.
It would be. It'd be fun to have two different versions, especially for ensembles that maybe don't have as fine percussionists and as big an arsenal, because then I could do even more with the percussion section if they don't have to do all the heavy lifting of some of the other things. So. I mean, it's basically like being Berlioz. I want more, more, more. Berlioz said, 300 French horns and whatever. He just wanted more and more on Symphonie Fantastique. Remember these great stories that the drugs kicked in, I think. And but this is true for him in general. I think he just had this great sense of wanting many layers of sound and a lot of power. And that's one of the things I love about band is you have really big sections. And it's so much fun. So much fun. Kid in a candy shop.
It's so much fun to conduct. And so I appreciate the challenges of the meter, and I appreciate all the orchestration, and I appreciate the extreme ranges that we're living in. You can ask our piccolo player if she also appreciates the extreme ranges. But the idea
she plays lowest and highest. Absolutely.
I know. And so the whole thing has been kind of like a theme and variation. And can you talk about your maybe some of the hemiola, some of the thematic material that moves over and over and over, and how did this come to your vision?
I initially had written that melody, the melody that starts the piece off, many years ago in a chamber sextet that I had done many, many years ago. And I always loved the melody and thought, this would be really fun to do for a large ensemble. And so I plucked that out of my past as a starting point for this piece. Nothing about this piece is like the other chamber piece. It's a very different piece of music, but the melody is the same. And it was really fun to start off and kind of just see where it was going to take me. I didn't expect it to go into all the different places that it went, but I liken writing music to walking a puppy on a very long leash. But it's still on the leash. You can't let it go 2 blocks away because it's going to get into trouble. You have to stay within the confines of what you're doing musically, But you do want to let that puppy explore and maybe start to nose around the corner. You're going to have to follow it, but you want to let the puppy explore and see where it's going to take you. And you might end up discovering something off the side of the sidewalk or something that was cool that you didn't know was there because of the puppy. So that's what the music is like for me. Is the process is like walking that puppy and being free, once again, being free to just see where the music wants to go instead of dictating, oh, this is going to be this kind of a piece and this is going to be the form. And, and some pieces are like that, and that's fine. And some pieces I write like that are much more controlled in that way. But this one is a little bit more free form. And it turned out, as you said, to be kind of a theme and variations, because I start with that theme. The theme keeps coming back, and parts of it, all of it, in a lot of different ways and treated a lot of different ways. I mean, sometimes it's this bucolic, almost folk song. Other times it's a big band chart. And then in between, right? And then we go into, then it inserts itself into this kind of, it's not new age, but this kind of ostinato rock new age thing that happens 2/3 of the way through. And then you hear the theme come in, during that, unexpectedly. So, but I wasn't planning that, but it just worked out so well. It's like, how could I resist? So it ended up being really fun to put together, and it ties into my love of development, form and development in a piece. That, as I was saying to your conducting students earlier, that Beethoven is such a hero for me of understanding how to keep a piece tight, how to do so much with very little, and to stay true to your material. And instead of throwing everything in the kitchen sink in, really, just keep reworking, your material. So I love to try to do that. Tight Squeeze is like that too, very much like that. One of the other pieces on the program tonight, Thursday night. So
As a conductor, it is my goal and role to expand the repertoire and increase the appetite of the students and the audience for a greater vision of the world. In your compositions, you are doing this without probably being as intentional as I am as an educator, but I'm seeking out uniqueness and creativity. And there are two pieces that the band decided to do. They voted on it, actually. And it was inspired by a recommendation from one of our students named Josie. And it was, we should really do paper cut because a lot of us are going to be middle school teachers. And then Tight Squeeze is really a very nice high school level piece. So great for honors bands and this and that. That's not to say that that's how I choose repertoire. And then you've mentioned another work that you called a point five.
Yes.
That I would like to purchase. So let's put that on, and I'll use it actually in 2 weeks. I'm substituting for someone on a guest conducting gig who had an illness, and so I'm coming in and I'm like, ooh, what am I going to do with these people? So having some of that repertoire that's unique, interesting, outstanding, and electroacoustic during the time of the pandemic, I turned to you immediately for a camp. They said, can you run summer camp online? I'm like, oh, maybe. And so I purchased paper cut. And so that was the one piece that got us through, and then tight squeeze. So these pieces, tell us a little bit about your vision and how an electroacoustic file comes in with your compositional style.
Well, and it turned out to be a very good thing for the pandemic because, ensembles where the students were, playing and practicing from home, having a track with which they could play and have that sense of, bigger sound and bigger place, that turned out to be a very lucky thing. So
lucky, it's changed the face of the world. Thank goodness. And you were there. You saved us.
I was very happy to be a part of that. But long before, of course, Paper Cut was written 12 years ago. And it was my very first electroacoustic band piece, and also the very first electroacoustic band piece for middle schoolers. It's imperative, I think, that professional composers really, really invest some of their time in composing pieces for younger students, for students at all levels, starting with absolute beginners, like that 0.5 piece I just finished called Count to 10 that I did last year. At the same time I was writing the big symphony, the big sophisticated symphony, I was doing Count to 10, and it was marvelous. It's a primer for any music student who's going to hopefully progress through their studies and start playing middle level Shapiro and other pieces, and then top level Shapiro and other pieces that give them these challenges, not only with electroacoustic music, but with chromaticism and different meters and all the things that someone should be able to do from the very beginning of playing music. There is no reason to wait until someone is 17 years old before they see a 5/4 bar, which happens way too often, So I wanted to address those problems. And then with Paper Cut and Tight Squeeze, grade 3, grade 4, providing literature, along with a number of other pieces in those grade ranges, providing thoughtful literature that's going to be a little outside the box and definitely different than normal band rep, but also gives them skill sets and confidence and experience musically that makes them better musicians. all while being hopefully relevant musically to what's around them. I mean, certainly Paper Cut was inspired for me by thinking about what's relevant to 13-year-olds, which is, who I was writing for, seventh and eighth graders. And this was back in 2010. And I was thinking, so what's relevant to them? Well, gaming, movies, TV, they're on screens all the time looking at stuff. And so I had two thoughts. One is the style of music. I thought it would be really fun to do some kind of like cheesy, B movie action track or something. And also the visual aspect, that the paper is not only a percussion instrument that they play and they rip it and they tear it and they crumple it and it makes this amazing sound with the group of them doing that, but they have to hold it way up above their heads. It not only in order for it to be heard properly, as opposed to playing it into a music stand, but to be seen. It's a visual piece. And what fun is that, to start choreographing your instruments, to realize the call and response sections. Everybody does this, and then the other section does that. Okay, who's going to do it? It took me almost as long to choreograph it and figure out, who's playing what with the paper and who's available to play what with the paper as it did for me to write the music. But I had such a good time doing it and taking, present day life into account and what's relevant for these middle schoolers, what's going to speak to them. Not that other traditional pieces aren't great for them to play as well, but we have a lot of that. And I didn't feel that we had very much of things that were more contemporary like that.
When we talk about engaging audience members as well as musicians, I think it's our right and our responsibility. And I also believe that the music that a conductor programs has to be a diet or a smorgasbord, however you want to look at life. And yet, when it comes to the Commission Composer Project and Conrad DeYoung, who had this vision and still supports the vision of this idea of all students, as many as possible, working with a living composer and celebrating their creativity. You will have a concert of all your music, and it will be an interesting experience for you because it spans your lifetime. So tell us a little bit about some of the things that have been positive and catapulted you from one idea to the next, whether it's acoustic, whether it was your jobs, or whether it's your creative vision outside as you look outside on that beautiful island where you live.
And that is undoubtedly a big inspiration because it's not that every piece is about the sea. Or about the whales jumping up from it, or the octopuses getting eaten by the harbor seals in violent death. It's not that. It's not so specific to that. It's more that for me, when I'm staring out into a great vista, that frees my mind. It just opens up my thinking and my thought process, and it untethers me to any expectations, to any traditions, to anything. I just feel that I can hear myself think, and that environment is just very conducive to me writing whatever I hear, which is the best advice for any composer. That's what I always tell student composers: write what you hear. And what you hear is going to be different from other people if you allow yourself to hear yourself. So, we're so used to, especially younger composers, of course, are influenced and often emulating what they've heard before. And that's part of the process of finding their own voice. But the sooner that we can guide them to trusting their own voice and exploring it and owning it, the better for music. I think that's what we all should be doing instead of just recreating that which has been done. You don't set out to do something new and groundbreaking and all of that. That would be a huge mistake to ever start with that in mind. Huge mistake. No one is that original necessarily. But what happens is when you free yourself, good things can happen and unexpected things can happen, very much by accident. And it kind of moves the peg forward a little bit. And I feel that if there's something I've been able to contribute, to the repertoire, it's been these large ensemble electroacoustic pieces that go in a lot of different genre styles that hadn't been explored very much in the repertoire, from what I could tell. And that's just felt really good to sit down with every commission, as I did with Free, and say, what do I feel like writing, But back to the student thing, I just have to say it all ties into the student thing and the audience thing, that it's a very three-dimensional experience. Playing music we're not just playing for ourselves unless we're rehearsing in our rooms. We are, first of all, playing with each other in an ensemble, so it's collaborative in that way between the ensemble and the conductor, and the ensemble with their fellow musicians. It is deeply important about how is that ensemble touching the audience in front of them. We cannot ignore the audience. I don't expect the audience to love everything we do. I think it's good to challenge them and just see what they're going to like. Some people are going to like something, some people aren't, and it's all fine. But I think it's really important to think about their reaction to something, and when we can engage them with visuals and with effects and with physical movement that they're not expecting from the concert stage, I think that's really exciting to do. And there's no reason not to do it. It's not that every piece needs that, but for the pieces where you can do it, pieces like Paper Cut, obviously with all the choreographed paper and a lot of people will do that in black light or use, colored paper and all these different themes, and it's just really fun. Or pieces like Tight Squeeze, where at the end I have everybody up and dancing at the end of that thing, starting with the trumpets when they have that little, flash thing. I think that's really fun to break down the fourth wall, as we call it. And the audience does not expect the band to suddenly get up and start dancing. That is just so much fun. I have another piece that called Lights Out, which is designed from the ground up to be played in the dark, very disorienting, a little chaotic, very up tempo, kind of a fun groove piece. It's a light piece. It's not a serious piece of music. It's just fun. And it's all done with all these LED lights and physical movement. Some bands play it totally standing up. They never sit down. It begins with a third of the band in the audience, which the audience doesn't even realize. And I start messing with the audience right away because I feel like that's my job description. I get paid to mess with audiences. It's so much fun. What I do in Lights Out is I start with they don't realize that the power is supposed to go out. Hopefully, if it's done a certain way, the audience is surprised because the band acts surprised, and everybody thinks they've just had a power outage. And in the midst of this, all of a sudden the track starts in very loudly, and very early on, in addition to the Ground Casa on stage doing a big rumble, in my track, I've got this big subsonic rumble. And what do I ask the musicians in the audience to do? Which is mostly the woodwind players, to gently kick the seat backs in front of them like little kids, but only for a couple of seconds. So it's automatically creating a surround sound, real physical experience for the audience member. I mean, that their seat is actually shaking when that low rumble is happening. But it happens so fast, by the time if they were to turn around, it would have stopped. And I only do that twice because you never want to overdo a joke, But it's that kind of thing, to mess with people and get them thinking in different ways about what a concert experience can be. I think that that's part of our responsibility as composers in the 21st century. Is like there's no rules anymore. We can do anything we want. Have fun with it.
I'm a firm believer in advocacy. I am a firm believer in the fact that you should take your time, talent, and resources and put them toward things you believe in. Obviously, as a conductor, as my mom says, I'd have the music world going, but I like to diversify my practice. And I believe in a lot of things that respect the environment, art, nature, and any of the arts that come together and collaborate. One thing that I noticed in your extensive website is that you share similar passions. Can you talk to us a little bit about your advocacy life and how you really do dedicate your world into being holistic?
Yeah, and there are two ways to do it, and thank you for that, wanting to talk about this, because it is, as it is for you, really dear to my heart, and something that I encourage everybody to do is to raise their voice for things that matter to them, whatever that thing is, and to get involved. Everybody's voice is worthy. And for me, there's almost two kinds of advocacy. There's the messaging that I can do through music. That music, of course, on its own doesn't have a message. It's just music. It can waft over people. They can hear it. Great. If you choose to attach a meaning to it, a program note, or maybe the conductor or even the composer from the lip of the stage talking to the audience about what the composer was thinking while writing that piece of music, you can discuss topics in a way that will have people in the audience going home and thinking and discussing these things in a way that they never would have occurred to them when they walked into the concert hall, that they'd be having those discussions. To me, raising awareness is such a huge part of advocacy. It's really the first step and the easiest step, is to have the conversations. So one way to do it is through the music itself. And I have several pieces that do that, not all of them, but certainly a number. And that gives me great joy. And another way to do it is to get involved with organizations that represent what matters to you, of which there are endless advocacy organizations for all kinds of things. And I have been very active really since I was composing in commercial music back in my 20s. I was been very active in a lot of efforts, both in and out of the music world. I certainly the bulk of my advocacy work for which I'm known is being on the board of ASCAP and the ASCAP Foundation, being on the board of the Copeland Fund, and overseeing his legacy and protecting his legacy and providing grants from his legacy and the fruits of his legacy to help other performers and composers, all these American artists that are funded through that program. It's marvelous. I'm newly elected to the Music Publishers Association of the United States, which is a voice for self-published composers in a business environment, from which we, not only, of course, do we learn from the big publishers, but they learn from us because we've always been at the front of the line for innovation because we can, because we're smaller. And so we've always been the early adopters of some of the business practices that now most of the publishers are doing. And those are just some of the many musical things I've been involved in. But on the other end of the spectrum, I love marine sciences. And where I live on beautiful San Juan Island is one of the most exquisite examples of marine biology and protection on the planet, probably, with the renowned Friday Harbor Laboratories there, which is an arm of the University of Washington. So I've been on their board for about 12, 13 years. And back in my 20s and 30s, I was very, very involved with the American Civil Liberties Union of Southern California, and I ended up being vice president of that very large board of directors. That is a 30,000 member chapter. And I did a lot of speaking for them on First Amendment rights and all kinds of things that are obliquely related, of course, to music, but it was both basically about human rights. Anything that somebody feels that they have opinions about and care about, they should get involved. It makes them a better person. It makes their lives more fulfilling. I think that everything I've done in and out of music has made me a better musician because we're not just composers, stick figures. We are whole people. We are holistic, entities that everything affects us in our lives. And you want to fill up your vessel with as much as possible to have something to pour out.
I love that comment because really it's all about passion and living a full life that helps other people
Right.
realize their full potential.
Exactly. It's about making the world better one human being at a time, or one audience at a time, or the people in the audience. Okay, you're not going to change the whole audience, but you will change the minds or raise awareness for 2 or 3 or more audience members.
The power of one.
It is the power of one. And that is never should be underestimated. And for music educators and conductors coming into the field, I am always telling them, remember how much power you have. The power of what music you choose to put on those student stands. What examples from textbooks do you choose to show them? How can you balance all these examples, including to show the diversity of composers out there from all different backgrounds? It's such a simple thing, but all it takes is forethought. And that forethought sometimes comes from a nudge from somebody else saying, hey, remember, do this. And that's all it is. We all do that for each other. It's very powerful.
Yeah, the diversity piece is important, and also expanding horizons of students and audience members. The variety of pieces that we are presenting that reflect your voice and colors. One of them includes a piece called Train of Thought, composed in 2015. Excuse me. Tell us a little bit about the work Train of Thought.
Yeah, Train of Thought was fun to do because it's very broody piece. I love writing dark music. I'm such a cheery person, but I really am in my happy place when I'm writing depressing dark music. It's not that depressing. It's just very brooding and very cinematic, I think. It later became, by the way, Trains of Thought for wind band, because when I was writing it, it's a sextet for low winds. And it can be any combination of low winds. It's fairly flexible, but they do have to be low. And I always, when I was writing it, realized it would be very fun to go vertically with it and make it for a large ensemble. But when I did it, it was a commission for any combination of wind instruments that I wanted. Anything from the wind band world is what the commission was, which was a really nice open palette. And so I thought to myself, well, the flutes and the trumpets, they have, and the clarinets, they got a ton of repertoire. They don't need anything more right now from me. I'd rather do something, for the underdog instruments, the ones that don't have enough rep. And so I went low. I went for the euphonium and the bari sax and all these, and the tuba and trombone and bass clarinet. And it's so much fun to have a horn. I did throw in a French horn because they can go very low, but they have that soaring little bit, which makes a lovely color. Uh, but it was so much fun to put this together because most of the time, and I told the musicians this when I was in rehearsal with them, most of the time, a composer is going to go for a very wide registration of sound for clarity, and that you do that intentionally. Things are many octaves apart and they soar, and that's a certain sound. I said this, I very intentionally kept everybody dark and clustered and, in these tight chords that are basically mimicking the train sounds that are coming from the, no pun intended, the track, the audio track in this case. I was so taken with recording that a colleague of mine, Dennis Bathory Kitts in Vermont, had made of the train, the Amtrak, going past his little rural neighborhood, that I asked him to record some more sounds for me and send them to me, and he did. And I cataloged and categorized those sounds with their little pitch clusters. And there was a crossing bell that was a C. It was a perfect C at 160 or something, and made it for a great polyrhythm. I didn't have to pitch correct it or time correct it or anything. The train sounds of the Doppler effect of the train passing were just endlessly fascinating to me. And I wanted the instruments to rise up from that and match it. So you couldn't quite tell where the trains were beginning and ending and where the musicians are. And in fact, I chose all my pitch material for that piece from the train sounds. That was my jumping off point, was the train. And my point of departure, so to speak. So anyway, that was such a fun piece to write. And the band version, it's a little bit different. It's a couple minutes shorter, and it's a little bit different in the order that I do things, but the material is the same. And I think it's just fun to give yourself a challenge of a different kind of orchestrating and a different approach to putting a piece of music together. And that's an example where not only are there electroacoustic sounds, digital sounds that I've programmed that are very different from the instruments, but I'm also using sound design with those trains and the many different train sounds and using them very musically as musical material.
We are so happy that you have come to River Falls to be the commissioned composer for 2022. And we are going to really enjoy all of the blessings that you bring as far as vision, color, inspiration. And already, we just want to say thank you.
Thank you. What an honor this is. And my favorite thing is getting to talk to students and audiences and share this passion. And thank you for bringing all of this to light. It wouldn't happen without you and without Patty Cudd. This is fantastic. Thank you.